One of the first things you're going to do is you're going to get your pattern, and you're going to get some stick pins, and you're going to put your pattern on your material. This is the inside material, and you're going to pin it. Try to pin the corners as good as you can, and then cut around it. Doesn't have to be perfect because you are going to sew so much of this that no one's even going to know how perfect that is. So yeah, I even cut this on a fold, and it did not cut all the way through, but it's no big deal because I can recut it. Come here. That's the inside part. I did the same thing for the outside parts. I had a bunch of squares that were already cut. I just laid my pattern down, pinned it, ouch, just keep poking me, and have several that I can cut, that I can make. So it's harder to start here on an edge sometimes, so go down a little bit.
Are you talking to me? Oh.
Because your feet are going to grab back here. If you start down here, sometimes it's pretty hard. So I always try to start where I know my teeth are going to grab. And I'm going to use this edge as my material guide. And I know this isn't straight, but that's okay. You'll see what I'm doing in just a second. When you start off, make sure you do a couple stitches that are going to go straight, and then you're going to do a back stitch to lock your stitches. You go forward, and then you do like 2 stitches forward and then 2 stitches backwards. That way it won't come unraveled once you get once you get to the end. So go ahead and use this as your guide. I try to keep my hands out of the way. And just go slow. And if it doesn't, like this is kind of dragging over to the side, stop with your needle down and raise your foot. Move your material where you need it. This isn't good material to show you on because this is kind of gives. This is what I use for the inside of my mask. It's actually cloth diaper that is clean and never been used, haha. But I use it for burnt cloths. You can see it just keeps kind of climbing over there a little bit, which is fine. This is the inside. No one's going to see it really, so it really doesn't have to be perfect. And when you get to the end, you're going to back stitch a little bit again to lock your stitches in. And then you sew all the way off the edge. It's not great, but nobody's going to see it, so it really doesn't matter. This part here that I didn't do to start with, I'm just going to flip it over and sew from this direction. Just like I did the other one. Keep it on, try to keep it as close to the edge, but make sure you do your back stitch. And sew all the way off the edge. Once you get this part done, I know it's not perfect, but it's all right. You're gonna want to clip little slots here. Now this is the liner, and don't cut to the thread, cut up to the thread. That just helps it when we go to put them together, the inside and the outside. This is the inside piece. It helps them fold flatter. And you just cut that all the way down. So the first step of this is you're going to sew your inside layers and your outside layer, and you're going to start here at the top and you're going to sew down the side. Since you have a foot like this one, you use your edge here. The foot I was telling you about, what I really like to do because it makes it so much easier. I have a little bag of my feet that I try to keep close. Sorry, the noise. There it is. It's this one. It's a 1/4 inch guard. I use it a lot when I make quilts, and you can see on it, it basically won't let your material go past that edge. That's why it's really makes sewing so much easier when you're doing 1/4 inch seams. So I put it on there. Okay, so you take your material, this is your outer cover, and you put your good sides together. That's how I cut it too. That way I can make sure that it's gonna fit right. I know it's weird. It'll be just fine if I did it this way, like where my good sides were on the outside, but just, you know, this is the first side I'm gonna sew, so I just put it to that side when I cut it. It just makes it easier for me to remember. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and sew this. Again, I don't like starting on the edge because the teeth don't always grab on the bottom. And then you'll see from this foot guide here will help keep my stuff where it belongs. So I'm going to do a couple stitches and then some back stitches. Remember to do that, because if you don't, then you can take this apart. When you get this done, you will be able to just pull it up and it'll just come clean apart. So always make sure you lock your stitches. And you can see how easy that guide makes it work. And it's bad that this is the first thing that, you know, you sew on a corner, but it's really not hard. You do your back stitching at the bottom and sew all the way off your material. Once you get done, just flip it over and finish sewing your extra that was here at the top. Couple stitches forward. Always do your forwards and back stitches. And I try to cut all my strings like right as soon as I do that. Right as soon as I take it off. Cut your strings so they don't. Sometimes they can get tangled up in the teeth. Sometimes they just cause problems, so it makes it look neater, easier as you're going. Okay. Okay, then we have our inside layer, our outside layer. So what next thing we're going to do is we're going to put our good sides. Oops, sorry, I forgot. We're going to cut our slits here. That's just to make it after you sew this part, make sure you cut your little corners here. That just helps it smooth out when you get ready to turn it right side out. Make sure, be real careful, don't cut all the way through the thread because it'll break your thread and then you have to resew it. So, not that I've done that before. Oh. Okay, once we have that done, we're going to turn it right side out here. And what we're going to do is we're going to sew this seam down. So turn it to where you can see the inside part here. And I'm going to switch back to my other foot, because being able to see what I'm doing is important. So, switch this one out. Okay. And it's really not hard. You just start it up here. Always make sure you keep your stuff as flat as possible. So I can tell there's a little bit of a bunch, so I'm going to put my needle down to kind of hold it in place and make sure I push that down. Again, 2 stitches forward, 2 stitches back to lock your sewing in. And then this part here that we just cut, just stitch it down. Doesn't have to be straight. Nobody really cares. Doesn't need to be perfect. It's just going to make it lay down and be smoother once someone's wearing it. Again, lock your stitches in, sew all the way off. Okay, I want to do the same thing down here where I didn't get all the way to the end. You see, that's still flipped up, so I want to sew that down too. And you can use thread that's not going to show, or you can use any color thread. It really isn't that big of a deal. Okay, and so I'm going to trim those threads in a minute. This is what it's going to look like. It's not, you know, nobody can tell, but it's not perfect. So don't let it bother you. Trim all the threads. And trim these. Okay. Alright, so I did the inside layer. I did it with a zigzag stitch because it kind of frays a little bit. I like it better to be a little more smooth. I'm going to call this the side closest to you and call it the good side. This side I'm going to call the bad side. It's a little more frayed. And then we're going to take, I mean, obviously this one's easy to tell, inside versus outside. So we're going to put our 2 good sides together, and we're going to pin at the top and the bottom. Do I have this right? I think so. Okay. I cut several at the same time, so wasn't sure I grabbed the right size. So we're going to start at the top and the bottom. Take our pins, go through this way. Try to do it on the seam in the middle because that's kind of our halfway point. And you just put it together. Doesn't have to be perfect. You're going to turn this inside out, so it's not a big deal. I try to do the top piece first because it's got the most bend to it. So let me get those pinned. I did something else, sorry. I hate using pins because they poke me and I don't like that. I got some clips that I like to use. And threaded clips, I think is what they're called. They are faster and easier. And they don't poke me. So clip it at the top and at the bottom. If you don't have clips, use pins. What we want is we want our material to stay in the right position so we can sew it. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to kind of, I'm going to start with the top. This side's coming down a little bit. Okay. Not going to worry so much about the bottom yet. So, and we are going to use our 1/4 inch again. I'm going to leave this one on. I put my backing, my outside fabric on the bottom. It grabs in these teeth better. This white stuff does not grab very well. So I'm going to start on the edge here as much as I can. And I'm going to sew in a straight stitch. And a couple stitches forward. Make sure I lock my stitches. And then I'm just going to sew them. Do the best you can. Keep it within your 1/4. Does not have to be perfect.
Are you saying even the fine doesn't pull up the columns?
This little notch here kind of is hard to sew over, so just do the best you can. Sometimes you see I'm having to reach through here. If you have something that's pretty big to go through, you can reach on the back and kind of lightly pull it. And then make sure you lock your stitch and sew all the way to the edge. It doesn't look perfect, don't even worry about it. We're going to sew the bottom along the same lines. Okay. And we're going to start down here where the lining is. Make sure you lock your stitches. Alright, so we sewed a row on the top and on the bottom. And then we're going to turn it right sides out. And see all my not pretty sewing is hidden. Can't even tell. So I like to cut off my little strings. Okay. So the next thing we're going to do is, you can feel inside here is the seam that we just sewed. We're going to sew that down. And again, I try to keep the outside material on these teeth rather than this white stuff. This white stuff seems to grab way too much and it gets caught and it's a pain in the butt. So and we're just going to keep this foot on because we just need it to be just a little, we just want to knock our seam down and hold it all together. So we're going to start up here on the white stuff. Sometimes this gets stuck, but we'll see. Make sure you lock your stitch. Okay, I'll lock. Make sure I push all this out as best I can so it comes out good and flat. If it's not a big deal. No one's going to know but you. Okay, again, I'm going to reach back here to the back. You can see, just lightly tug, because sometimes getting over these humps, see, it kind of gets stuck. And you can do a reverse, kind of help to get it through there. And sometimes it just won't do it. So you got to cut your string, take it out. Cut your strings. Cut my strings good. And go back in here a little bit further. No big deal. Let go, dadgummit. There we go. Sometimes they're just really stubborn, and that's all right. There we go. And just slow down. Sew that seam down. That's all we care about. Sure, do your back stitching. Sew all the way off. And see there, it's really not that big of a deal. You really can't, I mean, you can tell, but it's, nobody's gonna know but me and you. So I cut my strings off. And then we're gonna do the bottom. See this white material? I love it. I'm sure it works good for, I didn't even have to do that one. Works good for filtering, I think. Alright, so we're going to start back here. I'm going to sew this bottom seam down. Look at that, I missed 2 threads. Okay. See, sometimes they just do not want to go through. There we go. And we'll just make sure we flatten all this out as good as we can. You can iron it. It helps sometimes. Sometimes it don't matter. Sure I get this as flat as I can. There we go. Make sure you do your back stitch. Don't want it falling apart on us. And it's not super straight, but nobody's going to care. Okay, So we have our top and our bottom together. Cut all these strings, and then I'm going to come back. We're going to do the side pieces. I'm going to cut some elastic. This is for a little kid. I've been cutting their elastic pretty short. I think I'm going to cut it about 6 inches, and then I'll show you how to loop it together. Alright, so I have my 2 pieces of elastic. This is 1/4 inch braided elastic. If you can find it, you found gold, because I had to buy mine on eBay for real. Just got it in today and fixed up some other masks that I was working on. So what we're going to do is I fold this over 2 times and I zigzag stitch it here in the middle to hold the middle down good. And then I'll show you what I do on the ends to put the elastic in. So if you don't have a zigzag stitch, a straight stitch works just fine. I just like zigzag because that's just the way I am. Okay, just a little bit closer. And make sure you have all your frays and everything tucked in as good as you can. Don't worry about it, it's not going to be perfect. Okay, so we're going to do a couple stitches, and remember, we always back up, do our lock stitches, just in case. And we're just going to zigzag stitch this within, a finger's distance of the edge. And that's usually what it looks like. And again, I'm so ridiculous about cutting threads, but that's just the way it is. Cut them now or later. I like to have them cut. And go to the front and cut them. Alright, so here's what I do. I cut them a little bit long because if need be, you can always, double them up a little bit, tie them in a knot to make them shorter for whoever's wearing the mask. You can't add more on to it though. So I like to put a little bit extra on there, 1/2 inch. It's usually plenty, long enough. But this is a 6-inch elastic strap per ear. So I take it here on the end where it's folded over, and I just stick the end of it in there. You can pin it if you want to. I just stick it in there with my fingers and put it in my sewing machine. And I get it here as close as I can to the edge. Bring it closer. Here on the edge where my thread is. That way I'm holding the elastic and this edge of my mask. My hands are in the way, sorry. So this is what I do. And I don't care if it advances or doesn't. Half the time it's just going to go back and forth, and that'll give it a good secure hold on my elastic. And I love when it does that. It doesn't always cut my thread. My sewing machine needs to go in the shop. Okay, so you can see here that it just did that little bit of a stitch in here. But that's going to hold my elastic there. So now I can come back in here. Make sure my threads are out of the way. And I can do, that's just a tack, basically. It's just going to hold it there. Now I'm going to sew the rest on this one side. And I'm going to sew down to here where my other stitches are. If it grabs. If it doesn't, I'm going to cut it, move it just a little bit, start again. Okay, so let me cut my threads. Trim the rest of those up better later. And then, okay, that side's in there pretty good. I've got my original tack here. That one didn't advance, and then I moved on down to here. I know it's not in there very far. But here's this other one, my other end. I'm going to tuck it in there a little bit better, make sure it's doubled over. And I'm just going to put this, just that much of it, into this little sleeve here. Tuck it over. Now here, you got to be careful. Make sure your elastic is over to the side, because if you don't, if it's underneath, you might sew it to your mask and it may not be usable like that. So again, I'm going to do my zigzag stitch. And I'm going to back it up a little bit. And I want it to catch here on the edge where my elastic for sure is caught. And you want to still do your back stitching on this. And you can see from here, I always give it a tug, make sure it's going to be in there good. And then trim my threads. And we made a mask. I have a few threads to trim, but it's not a big deal. What's important is, oh, I only did one side. That's not important. Do my other side. So, sew my zigzag stitch down the side here. Lock your stitches in.
So, one of the issues with this was that metadata was wrong.
Yeah.
How would it have gotten wrong on 6 different associations unless someone may have changed it? And how would it fix itself? Last night, all of a sudden, it started working at least for one or more of the...
Alright, so we did the zigzag stitch down the side here. We're going to do the same thing with our elastic on the top and the bottom. Trim this off real quick. And my thread came out. That's fun. Okay. Alright, back in business. Okay. So I've got my elastic in there just a little bit, you can see. And I'm just going to tack it at first, just to make sure I keep that elastic from coming out. see it just sews just a little bit there. Oops, you can't see that. And then we'll sew this here. Okay. And then we're going to wrap it around to the back side. And I'm going to turn this up because it's kind of messy. I'm videoing.
I could still say I need a nap.
Well, sorry, Caitlin. Ask your mom about Jeff. And then we're going to line it up there. And we're going to sew zigzag stitch so we get as much coverage on this elastic as possible. Go back. Now I like to sew all the way to the edge, and if you sew part of it on the elastic, nobody cares, it's fine. Alright, trim up some of these. Sorry, all these threads. Alright. And don't pull threads. Always cut them. Just never know what you're going to pull out. That one's about to cut my elastic. Alright, so there you have it. That's a mask for a little kid.